Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively in front of non-technical audiences, especially. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. If you are watching this interview, a review would be nice, or a like. And if you're listening to it, well, a review and a like would be nice there as well. So today, my guest is Marilee Lloyd. And I believe she's actually the first architect I've had on the show, on the podcast. I'm really interested to learn more about how she got into that and just her journey generally. So welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Marilee.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So I mentioned that you studied architecture. So what was the motivation to go into architecture, or at least study it in school?
I found the act of building and creating fascinating. And as I was a kid, I was interested in history and how culture influenced the built form. And I was also interested in medicine and genetics. And um, that sort of melding of everything led me to look at architecture, and then as I developed in my career to slant that architecture career toward science and laboratory planning. So I developed through architecture and then took that turn into a more science related laboratory planning field. So kind of a unique perspective. My dad was an engineer, and so the sort of built environment and what happened with it was always a part of the household conversation. And even, almost 40, about 37 years ago when I graduated from college, it was still kind of a different thing to be a woman in architecture, and therefore a woman in many other science related fields. So I was lucky in that I never felt like my parents limited me. The experience was, challenging, but super glad I did it. It's a great occupation. I'm having a delightful time.
Wonderful. Now that I think about it, Marilee, one of the guests I had very early on, so this is probably why I didn't even think of it at the time when I first introduced you. She studied architectural engineering. So, what's the difference between architectural engineering and architecture?
Um, well, at a certain level, it depends on the school you go to. But architectural engineering often has a more technical focus. So the integration of the built form with the engineering that goes inside of it, and the technical side of putting together that that building, whereas architecture has that technical part to it, but it also has a very strong design emphasis. So I think that gives you um, uh, sort of the parallel or different paths of the two.
Got it. You did mention that you moved into lab planning. So when you say lab planning, do you mean designing, wet labs?
Yeah, yeah. I focus on, well, I would say it is the sort of scientific environment, because but it includes wet labs, dry labs, which are sort of computational, don't have as much um, sinks and drains and things like that, but they can still have a lot of pipe services. So they can be clean rooms, for example, or production facilities to a certain degree. So um, it is where people are doing scientific discovery. I also do learning environments. So all those labs folks are going to learn how to, learn chemistry or learn biology. That is something I design, those
Oh,
kinds of spaces.
interesting. I didn't even realize that that was something that maybe an architect would focus in specifically. So what motivated you to focus on designing labs?
Mostly it was my interest in science, and as I approached college, I thought, well, do I want to go into something more medical related, or do I want to do something like architecture? And really it was as I went through architecture school, I enjoyed it and found that architecture is something I love. But doing the design work related to science facilities allows me to bring in that other part of my head and sort of engage all the things I love about designing the built environment, making it breaks down for me to making a space that is engaging and interesting and invigorating for people to doing science, whether they're learning about science or actually doing the research to produce the science and to produce stuff.
Okay.
So
So,
I just
so
find it fun.
wow, okay, that's so interesting. So for anyone who is watching or listening to our conversation, and maybe they're an architecture student and they're thinking, wow, maybe I want to get into lab design too. How would you suggest they go about doing so?
Well, actually, once there aren't any programs currently that focus on that sort of thing within an architecture school. But I would suggest taking some chemistry or biology classes just to make sure that science is something of interest. So when people are talking about science around you, it starts to make sense and you can put all the pieces together and ask decent questions. Then when you start to practice, look for a firm that is doing that kind of work and find a lab planner, a laboratory architect that can help teach you and show you how things work. I was lucky enough to work for a time at a university and learned how to do a variety of different types of laboratories through doing that, both research and learning spaces. So it's a process. Architecture is one of those fields where it takes a good bit of time and focus to really develop that body of experience. A lot like medicine or
Interesting.
science.
So what type of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess the not necessarily experience, but the what do you need to know, I guess, to be a lab architect as opposed to just an architect, not just, but an architect that designs commercial buildings or houses, for instance.
Well, I think one, fundamentally, you have to kind of love science and be interested in and curious about things like that. Um, you also, I think the focus has to be on being curious and wanting, and I think architects in general come to the profession with a spirit of curiosity and asking questions of our clients and trying to provide them the best kind of space that they need and solve their problems. But that sort of curiosity and interest is foundational, as is an interest in science. And um, at a broader perspective, wanting to make things better, provide that foundation for scientists, because that's ultimately what we're doing. We're providing the space, the environment, the experience, because it's about designing an experience, really. That's what a building does, for someone to do great science. So I find that opportunity to engage with these folks doing this fascinating. I learn something every single time, and I really enjoy that. I like the fact that this particular thing for me, and I think everyone has to come to it their own way, engages both my interest in understanding how things go together, how the world works, and how um, how this building can support that.
Okay. When you were talking, Marilee, it made me think about transitioning. So, maybe there's someone or people who are listening or watching this episode, and they're thinking about lab planning or lab, being a lab architect, but they're thinking, well, what if I change my mind at some point and decide I want to design houses or commercial buildings too? How difficult would it be to make those transitions between the different types of architecture?
I think it's always possible. I know a lot of folks who worked in the commercial architecture field and then pivoted as they found opportunities to. So I think it's possible. There's a knowledge base, one way or another, as you go from any particular area of focus within any profession, right? So it takes a little time to make that transition, and increasingly knowledge bases are more and more specific. So there is time to make that pivot, but it's possible. It's not at all impossible. It just takes a little time and focus and asking the right questions of fellow professionals and really seeking them out. You know, if you are interested in something, find a lab planner like myself. I'm always open to questions. I love to hear from folks and help them along in their journey. So I would encourage someone to find a lab planner, ask them questions, see what you can do to help, see if it's of something that would be of interest to you. You know, it is a very specific field, but it is also kind of in demand right now.
Are there specialties even amongst lab planners? And if so, what are they?
Um, Somewhat. A lot of folks will focus on doing research environments. Others will focus on learning environments. Still others focus on different types of buildings, be that clean rooms, which are have our filtered air, and in allow for research in a very specific kind of clean environment, and there are levels to that. It could be a plant sciences building, so interested in agriculture. So there are, yes, there are in fact different types and different areas of focus.
Interesting. I've been in a clean room before, and it never occurred to me that I suppose there was an architect who was involved with where in putting this whole facility together. So it's so interesting. And like when I think of architecture, I just think of a house or a building. I never thought of it more specifically than that. So this is really cool. Hopefully, the people who are listening or watching this conversation know about this and now are thinking, hey, maybe this is something to look into.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So when it comes to even the career that you've had, Marilee, I'm assuming that the days of staying at one place for your entire career and then getting a pension and a gold watch, those times are times I'll never experience because I'm not old enough. But when it comes to that type of thing, I'm assuming that you worked at various places. So when it comes to you making decisions as to where you go next, what your new role is going to be, what criteria do you use to make those decisions?
I think there are a couple. One is what what is the challenge I want to undertake? What do I want to learn? What is the experience I want to have in my career? What will make me better and stronger as a lab planner or just as a person? What is a personal challenge I feel like I need? Um, I have been at my current firm, HED, for a little over 5 years, really loving it. A terrific group of people. And I think um, a lot of what makes a work environment interesting and stimulating and positive is those other people. Because whether it's a science environment, whether you're doing research, whether you're teaching people, whether you're an architect, um, it is about those collaborations, those interactions, those conversations. And we can do that virtually, you and I here, or in person in the office. And I think it's those stimulating conversations and the potential for them that makes the work interesting, no matter what it is, and the opportunity to do better stuff. A lot of times when I've changed firms, it was to do more interesting work, something that engaged me more, the opportunity to lead something, for instance. So I think people have to decide at various points in their career what is the next thing they value. What is and it changes for different career paths. Um, but it is about finding both what feeds your soul and, what you find of value, what you need.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've done a number of these interviews, Marilee, and when I have conversations with people about workplaces, it often comes to talking about culture and how important culture is. So when it comes to the work that you've done in the various companies, what type of culture do you prefer?
Um, as you might guess from my previous conversations, I like that sort of collaborative um, environment where I can engage with people across the firm and do a variety of different kinds of work. For example, I work in with our science sector doing scientific projects. I also work with our higher education sector doing projects within higher ed. I work with our healthcare sector when we do clinical based project. I don't do very much in hospitals other than their clinical environments, not their patient environments. So there is and I work a lot with our workplace sector in when we do a science environment, those always have offices, collaborative spaces, amenity spaces, and those are equally important to the experience that the people in the buildings are having. So that collaborative um, experience in designing those buildings is really a driver for me and a thing I like.
Interesting. I tend to like those type of environments
Hmm.
myself. But when it comes to cultures, and they can vary amongst companies wildly. But
Yeah.
but I think most companies, if not all, have certain things in common. One of which is, if you want to move up within a company, you have to say something. You can't be silent. Typically, the silent people are the ones who get ignored. I had a used to know this woman, and she was an engineer, and she's a patent attorney now. But back when she was a young engineer in the 70s, she thought that if she just did her job well, people would notice and she'd get promoted. But she realized that wasn't the case. It was the people who advocated for themselves with the appropriate people, the decision makers, who are the people who moved up within companies. Essentially, the people who are good at speaking to people. So when it comes to, at least for me, when I first started working, I wasn't that great at speaking with others, but I saw the benefit of getting better at it. Just public speaking generally, or giving presentations, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Um, you know, I sort of always thought of myself as a very introverted, quiet person too. Um, and so it takes a lot for me to project and connect. But I've found that I get better value, better energy out of making those connections. So um, that's one of those things that's sort of propelled me forward. And I think you're right. Learning that you need to connect with people to advance your career is super important. I think it's also um, good to understand that having good communication skills, being able to talk to others, it not only advances your career, it can make you think better. Um, it offers you the chance to engage with people and learn more about their lives so that you have a broader understanding of things. So um, I when I was a kid, we moved quite frequently. My father was offered different opportunities at firms, and so um, I had to learn to engage with others. And so that is one driver towards making me more able to talk to other people. It's still difficult for me when I go into a room, and there's a bunch of people I don't know. That's still difficult. But speaking to a group of people um, and delivering a presentation is a little easier, I find. And I think everybody's mileage varies. But for me, being able to um, rely on the information I've gathered and the experience and be able to share that with people. So framing it more as a conversation, I guess, is what helps me.
Yeah. Yeah. When I'm the same as you, Marilee. I find it much easier to give a presentation than to go into, let's say, a networking event and speak to people about, well, whatever people speak to each other, whatever they speak about at these networking events. I was just at one fairly recently, maybe just a couple of days ago. And whenever, at least for me, whenever I go to these type of things, people, you walk in and people are already having conversations, and you're trying to gauge which conversation do I even want to join. And then you're also, at least in my mind, I'm also thinking, am I going to be interrupting these people if I just start talking? I mean, you have to wait for the opportunity to even start talking. And then when you do start talking, is that talking even, is it, what's the word I'm looking for? Is it wanted? I mean, these two people that could be having a conversation could be just want to speak with each other. And then here you come just talking and just push out your hands like, "Hi, my name is such and such." And it's like, who the hell are you?
It's true. It's true. And I find it's, often a whole lot easier to take another person with me. So it is just easier to springboard around if there's another human that I can interact with. That usually is makes it a whole lot easier for me, because entering a room cold, I revert to my way introverted self and do the same things you do.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
we got to get better, Marilee,
it's
for,
true.
for our own sake. And
It's very true.
Something I also struggle with is going to these events and engaging in conversations that I do not care about at all. I mean, I live in San Diego, and recently we had what's it called, Hurricane Hillary, or I guess it was downgraded to a tropical storm. So that happened on Sunday. So at the event that I went to a couple of days ago, people were talking about that. I just remember thinking to myself, I do not care about this at all. I have nothing to add to it. I'm not even interested in it at all. So what am I supposed to do? Just stand here and just wait for these people to finish up on this topic and maybe introduce another topic? And it's just, I can't stand these things. But at least they got food. So
There you go. There you go. And I find sometimes it's just, useful to say, yeah, that was boy, we got a lot of rain. And um and move on. Luckily, I wasn't in the San Diego area, so um, I but from a distance, we saw all the warnings and stuff that were about it. So I guess I might have. I guess I could say something like, how did it go? Are you okay? Those sorts of just general questions to start to pivot the conversation. But yeah, those pivot points are really hard, in a group conversation. It is, so what do you do? It just seems to come out of left field sometimes, but
100%. That's everyone's pretty much go to, and at least for me, once you've answered that for the umpteenth time, it's kind of boring answering that same question. But I can understand why people would ask it. They don't really know you, so what else are they supposed to ask? Ask about Hurricane Hillary. Here's what happened. On Sunday, it rained a lot, but then Monday was fine. That was it. There was like no rain at all. People were out walking. The sun was out. You wouldn't have even known that there was this huge hurricane or tropical storm that came through. It was Sunday was a lot of rain. I even went out. I got a message on my phone saying we were supposed to hunker down. We're supposed to get food. Make sure we were sheltered and all that. I still went out a couple times on Sunday, but then Monday was just like nothing ever happened.
wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I suppose at a certain point it's good to be prepared, but I and the whole having those, I think people rely on those weather kinds of conversations simply because they're easy. And it gives them something to fill space. So maybe one thing that you and I and people like us could do is find those kinds of prepare 4 questions, just as kind of little thought starters before you go into an event, something that's relative to, or relevant rather, to whatever the focus of the event is. If it's a sport event, something about baseball, or, whatever it happens to be. Or if it's a science event, something about certain research that you think these people might be interested in. Just, an icebreaker.
Yeah. Yeah, that I think you're onto something, because especially now, if you were to ask somebody at a networking event in San Diego about the weather, I mean, the answer would be pretty short. It's sunny.
Yeah, San Diego is one of those places where, in general, the weather is consistently, what is it? I would say 80s to 70s for highs most of the time. You're within that band, and it doesn't get a whole more chillier, boy, more chilly than 50 or so. And it's just, so the weather is one of those constants. Maybe something else needs to be the dynamic thing that you bring in.
Yeah, we got to move on from weather for sure. This is not a four-season area, that's for sure. Marilee, when I first started this podcast, it all really stemmed from my own struggles giving presentations in front of people. And when I thought that maybe other people with more technical backgrounds had those same struggles, and I was curious to see what they did to overcome them. So when it comes to the presentations that you give, and one of the issues I used to have was just getting really nervous before giving presentations. Is nervousness something that you that succumbs, or that you deal with, and so how do you manage your nerves?
Yes, it is. And what I have tried to do is, and I think it has dissipated a little bit, and I've been able to sort of focus and change it over the years so that it becomes energy. And I use it as energy to make my conversation and movement more more purposeful during the presentation. I tend to, when I'm speaking in front of at a conference, for example, when I'm speaking in front of an audience of about 50 or more, I'll move around so that not only are they looking at what's on the screen, they may be engaged by my own movement to keep their brains and their minds active. So, and to feed my own energy so that it feels more dynamic. So being able to use those nerves to make a better presentation, and to not let it bother you. Well, maybe not let it stop you. It's going to bother you. Just don't let it stop you. I have also realized over time, having attended these things, that most people want you to do well. They're rooting for you. They want whatever information you can give them. They want you to do a nice job. So they're not out to hurt you. So once that sort of flipped in my brain, it became easier because these people were with me. They're not against me. And so understanding it from that perspective made it a little bit easier too.
Nice. Yeah, I think you're right. In most instances, people don't want to see you wet the bed when you're up there giving a presentation.
Exactly.
Because at some point, they may be the one up there giving a presentation themselves, and they wouldn't want to think that the people in the audience want them to do poorly as well. So this
Right.
has been a great conversation, Marilee. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
You can reach me at my email. It's mlloyd@hed.design, and mlloyd@hed.design.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Marilee.
Thank you.